Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I am sure you are wondering, what is this mess right here that we have going? I want to, before we get into day number, what are we at, 9? No, day 10 of the, should have my phone over here, day 10 of Lenormarch. I promised to go over a very, I think, important aspect of Lenormand. Now, many people, I think, I have heard, talk about Lenormand as if it is inherently more negative than tarot or something like that, that it's kind of inclined to have a negative message. And that simply isn't true. So I wanted to kind of dissuade that notion and also talk about a very important factor, which is the understanding that cards in Lenormand have an energy. So they have in broad terms, they have a positive, a neutral, and a negative energy, but there are also positive neutral and neutral negative cards. And understanding this is quite important, I think, for getting accurate readings and for, kind of not having muddy readings. Now, I found a really good in the book, Lenormand 36 Cards, An Introduction to the Petite Lenormand by Andy, cover, there you go, Andy Boroveshengra, which I have found to be very great. This is very traditional, and there are a couple that I don't do myself that way, although I understand why they're put in those groupings, and I'll discuss that. But he does have, so if we look in his table of contents, he does have a section on positive to neutral to negative cards. And so he talks about looking at Lenormand positive to negative on a continuum. It's not just positive or negative, it's on a continuum. And so that if one is positive and the other is negative, then the 36 cards are going to plot alongside it in order to kind of go along this spectrum. And it's really important to understand that because the neutral and the neutral positive and the neutral negative. So these in the neutral, we've got positive here, we've got negative here. In this middle is a neutral spectrum, right? Those cards are influenced by the positive or the negative cards on either side of it. And this is something I think that's quite important to learn, and there are a couple exceptions, and we're going to talk about that. But I just wanted to say, again, a cheap, very good book for traditional Lenormand. I think I highly recommend this. Man and woman cards, they don't have any positive or negative attributions to them whatsoever, okay? Now, positive cards, these are all, and if you look at these, you have 1, 2, 3, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positive cards. Now, I'm going to put these in here for the moment, but I disagree with them, for me personally. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 traditionally negative cards. Okay, so equal positive and negative cards here. I think this is so important to see. Neutral cards, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, and then neutral positive, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4 that are neutral negative. So we actually have quite a balanced system. It is not heavily balanced towards being a negative system in any way, shape, or form. And I think that that's really important to see visually. So these are positive, positive, uplift the cards that they're next to. These are negative, and they drop down the cards that are next to them. The ones in the middle are on neutral spectrum, neutral positive, neutral, and neutral negative. And they are much reacting to and take energy from the positive or negative cards around them. But you can see visually that we have quite a positive, or not positive, quite a balanced system here, and this is why I love Lenormand so much, because for me, a card system, any kind of card system, needs to have balance. In order for it to be realistic, in order for it to do more than give affirmations or doom and gloom, it needs to be fairly balanced, and this actually is very balanced. Now, some couple exceptions to these rules, and we're going to go over these cards, but the stars card, traditionally the star card and the clover card get their meanings actually reversed, while generally the negative cards will just kind of impact the cards around it. For the clouds card, the clouds is the most negative of the cards, the most powerful negative card, and it can actually flip the meanings around. So this will be an unfortunate event instead of a, fortuitous event, and we can have, kind of the stars declining versus rising with the stars if they are next to the cloud card. So those are kind of exceptions. I treat clouds, I don't really reverse the meanings, but I do pay attention when the clouds are nearby. So that's traditionally something to pay attention to. The other thing to pay attention to for me is that I actually disagree with, just personally, I want these in the fox and the coffin are considered negative cards in this particular tradition that Andy, and I do apologize for calling him by his first name. I do not know him personally, but I can't say his name. So Mr. Andy, I mean deep respect to him. I just don't want to slaughter his name over and over again. In the tradition that he is coming from, these two cards are inherently negative. I do not see the fox card is inherently negative. I would put the fox card truthfully in the neutral to negative, because it does indicate something is wrong, but it can also be just a warning to get some more advice. It can also be coming at something from a sideways perspective for me personally. So I'm very strong about that, so that's why I kind of want to make sure I point that out. The coffin card for me is also not negative or positive. For me, the coffin card exists as neutral. It is an end of something. Whether that is positive or neutral depends on what's ending. I mean, for me, it's just common sense. If we have strife and discord that is ending, that's a positive thing. If we have a relationship ending, that could be positive or negative, depending on what's best served by that relationship ending. If we have somebody's well-being ending, that's not a good thing. If we have depression and clouds ending, that's a positive thing. So for me, the coffin is one of the most neutral cards. It just exists as an ending, and depending on what it ends is whether it's positive or neutral or negative. And so that to me is a pretty big shift, and but I hold pretty strongly to it. I also think some of these cards, and it's not that I'm trying to get rid of negative cards, because I'm not, but this is how I read things. This is definitely a disagreement, but oftentimes it can also just be repetitive, right? A whip is negative, but a broom isn't necessarily negative. It's just about repetitive motion, and sometimes it's not repetitive negative things. Mice are eating things away, crosses, mountains, clouds. Scythe for me is painful, but it's also harvesting, so it is it's a hard thing. It would probably truthfully be more neutral negative, but for the sake of not confusing things too much, that's very personal, so I'm not going to muddy the water, so to speak. Same thing with the fox. I really don't see the fox as being negative. That's the way that I personally read. I don't know if somebody else reads more from the German mindset, whether or not that holds true, or if that's just me personally. I'm not sure on this. This one I'm very strong about. So those are kind of the exceptions to the rule, right? So let's take a quick look at these. These are positive cards. We have the clover, the stars, the bouquet, the key, the moon, the fish, the heart, and the sun. Those are negative. I'm just going to confuse you guys to death. These are positive cards, and they uplift these neutral cards that are by it. They're going to lift up a card that it is next to, because they have that kind of power. The negative cards are the whip and the broom, with the caveat that I said, the mice, the cross, the mountain, the clouds, and the scythe, again with the caveat. And if you're going to be very traditional, then you'll want to use the coffin and the fox as negative cards. I do not. I just explained why. Neutral cards are the letter. It's just a letter. It could be positive or negative, which is also what I feel about the ending. Bear, ring, garden, tower, and paths. Those are just neutral. They don't have any inherent energy placed on them except for by the cards that are around them. And then we have neutral positive. So these can be neutral, but they can also move towards the positive, such as lilies is about harmony, which is positive, but it can also be about sexuality and family, which might be neutral. We have the anchor, which can be a positive thing to have a job, but it can also be neutral. Ship, dog, child, house, rider, stork. So those are neutral, but they're closer to positive. And these are neutral. I'm not entirely sure why the book is this way. I guess because sometimes it's about secrets. So that makes it more to do with neutral, negative. We have the tree for well-being. We have, and sometimes not so well-being. We have the birds, which can be anxiety. And we have the snake, which can be deceit. I don't personally see it that way. I see it as a winding way. I see it as transformative, not a straight shot. So in some ways so it's a little, I can live with this in the neutral, negative category. They just move a little bit depending on what they're next to, and depending on the question, they may be moving to neutral, negative. And then for me, the fox is neutral, negative. Okay, so it's important to understand these. So for me, this goes into neutral, and so this is our pile. And you will see that the majority of the cards are in the neutral to the shifting neutral, positive, neutral, negative area. And then we have our power cards that are pretty even in the positive and the negative category. And so I think you can visually see that it's actually quite a balanced system, which I personally quite love about Lenormand. But you hear that, oh, it's just a blunt little negative, system, and that's just simply not the case. And so I wanted to point that out. So let's put down a grand tableau, just so you can see how some of these might touch each other and have play a factor or role in the matter. And I know you think, oh, that's just so complicated. It's really not. I would make a list of them so that you can be aware of it. If you do a little white book like I do, or a little guide, or if you have a little guidebook with it on there, when you're going through your Lenormands, you can put like a positive, negative, positive, neutral. You can kind of put a little symbol by it and just kind of pay attention to it. And eventually it will just start to make sense. If you look at the card, it makes sense. And we'll look at that in a second here. So let's lay out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Let's just get those in camera and not so whopper-jawed. And I'm not going to spend a ton more time because we'll talk more about this as the month goes by. But I did want you to start to become aware of the cards. But it does, as I said, make sense. The sun, it makes sense that is going to be positive. The fish can be about abundance, so that's going to be positive. The bouquet is going to be positive. Stars rising, that makes sense that that's positive, right? So these kinds of cards really do make sense when you think about it. As being, same thing with the birds being neutral to negative, is because it can just be about communication, which could be about anything. It's neutral, depends on what they're talking about. Or it can be about anxiety, which is to the negative side of things. I didn't start these up high enough. Anyway, so here we have all the cards, and so we can look. So the letter card is a neutral card, but because the sun is next to it, it's a happy message. So we have positive things that are going on here. Let's find where the clouds are. Infamous clouds. We've got an ending that is not good, right? Now, this is what's important to understand. Here we have an ending. What kind of ending? A negative ending. If we switch this around, where this is the first card, we have a depression, an oppression that is what? It's ending. And so that's actually makes this actually good. We want to see this going away, right? You can, if you read linearly, also read this as an ending to negativity. So for me, these two next to each other, I tend to read an ending to dark clouds. So it just depends on, you've got to, this, like I said with everything, it's about consistency. It's about finding out what works for you and paying attention to that and staying consistent with it. So if we have a scythe here, right, the pointy edge is pointing to a ring, which is about commitment. Well, it's not good to have an end, a painful ending to a commitment. That's, that would make it more negative. However, because it is not the coffin, but it is the scythe, for me, says you gain something from it. So it may be an ending that maybe is due to have happen. Here we have the cross, the mountain, the cross, and the mice. Not so great going on here. But we have an obstacle that's caused by burdens, but the burdens are being eaten away. So having burdens eaten away is actually kind of a good thing, right? You're whittling away at it, and so we might start to think about, okay, well, what is it that's eating away at this particular burden? So we might look into the mice, the house of the mice, and see that it is harmony. So a striving for harmony might start to eat away at the burdens. There's ways that you can start to read with that. I'm trying not to get complicated. I just want you to see how these may line up, and understanding the spectrum that they lie on is important. So when we look to the ship, and I would recommend making yourself a little chart like this. So here is a little chart that has positive, positive, neutral, neutral, and neutral, negative, and then negative over here. Now I put these traditionally, even though I disagree with that particularly, and and even the scythe. I don't know why I do that, and I know exactly what it is. Could be over here in the neutral negative, but I left these as tradition so that I could have that reference. So then you can think about, okay, well, we have the ship, which is generally a positive neutral thing, and then we put it next to another positive neutral thing and a positive card. That really lifts this journey up to being something that is a good thing. This long journey that you're on is a positive experience. It's something that is a good thing. So knowing what the positive, negative, and neutral categories are can be very helpful in starting to really get at the nitty-gritty. And that doesn't just mean for a grand tableau. So let's take a look. Let's pull out our cards for today, because we have two what are considered generally negative cards, right? We've got the snake. We have the snake in the coffin. Here's the coffin, and there's the snake. Okay, so understanding, of course, again, for me, this is neutral. So that's quite, I know that that's a stray off from tradition, and so you have to come to your own understanding of what the coffin card might mean to you. So when we look to the cards as what's in the guidebook or the handout that I gave you, the coffin is an ending or a finish. Now this can also be losses. Traditionally, it can also be sickness. I don't read for sicknesses, but it can also be that idea of feeling boxed in. Those are negative energies. So because of those meanings, okay, you could probably make an argument with me that it could be neutral negative, because the ending phase for me is neutral. But if you get into feeling boxed in, thin, being sick, these kinds of things, it moves towards negative. So I could take the argument that this, along with fox, should be in neutral negative mode. But I don't always go straight to, oh my gosh, it's the coffin, right? Because I'm generally thinking it's an ending. What is ending? Then we'll decide whether it's positive or not. So we have that. Then we have the snake card. And the snake card is about knowledge, about a winding path, and about transformation. But let's look let's look over here, because I know that I am biased in that area. Let's look. I don't know why I have a passcode. I'd like to be able to get it off. Let's look to the traditional meaning so that we can get a more unbiased look at this, because I admit to that. So here we have the snake, which can be complications, twists and turns, which is a winding. That's generally how I read the snake, as a winding path. It's not a straight shot, it's winding. So, you know, that's generally how I do this. But it can also be treachery, which I don't usually ever see it as treachery so much. But sedition, that's a very traditional way of looking at the card. But for me, I think about it as twists and turns, and I do have the added thing of transformation, which I know is not traditional. I just choose to use it anyway. But he even says the snake is certainly not a nice card, but it is not an evil card. So if the snake does hurt you, is more of a personal card is talking about. But he does say that's not evil, at least. So this is here. So I get the winding road. So I'm not entirely off the beaten path here traditionally, which is a good thing, right? The other thing would be then, let's look at the coffin. And I guess I should put them in order. The coffin is about sickness, endings, and losses. Now, I agree. He does say the coffin is about endings, not about transformations. Don't confuse the two. And I agree. This is not the card. This is not the death card in tarot. This is an ending. It is not about transformation. I do think about that more with the snake. Whatever falls immediately before the coffin is set to end. Often the card that follows it is somewhat diminished or becomes sickly. So it's a less of a, because the head's here. If you think about the head here and the feet is a little bit less of a impact. So you look at what's in front of it to decide what it is that's ending. And of course, again, as I said, if it's a positive thing to have something end, well, then that makes it a positive card. So for me, it's just neutral. Neutral negative. I'll go with neutral negative. So the question for today, before I'll pull cards here for this, but the question as the cards are, if you see the snake as a winding way or transformative process, what things have cut off your progress towards transformation and how have you overcome them? So we've had a couple heavier questions, haven't we? But that's, at least tomorrow we get the bouquet, which is a good thing. I think a lot of things have the impact of cutting off that kind of path towards transformation, or even, made things a little bit more winding for me. And that is along the lines of just life in general. Sometimes, being a mother, if you have young kids, time is a big one. If you don't have the time to invest in, these kinds of transformative energies, that can get halted there. Things such as divorce and obviously Michael's death and major things, shifts like that. But those things also do in the end cause things to increase as well, and that transformative process to actually increase. I'm not going to go too deep into the answer of this question because I did spend a lot of time on positive and negative. I think that that's a fairly clear thing there. For me, it's always been what has halted my progress, which I would think about, I guess, with the snake and the coffin card, but what's maybe halted my progress has generally been time, not having enough time, as well as major events that can just kind of stop you in your tracks until you have the time to kind of work through those things, and then you can continue on your path. But in the end, it's all part and parcel to moving along transformatively. So I hope that this has been helpful, just in letting you really pay attention to the ideas of positive, negative, and neutral cards, and the understanding of neutral, negative, and neutral, positive, neutral, and neutral, negative. So just again, think about Lenormand on a ruler with the positive cards starting here, and then it's a continuum to the negative cards. And the way that the positive is going to influence any of the neutral cards, so is the negative going to influence any of those neutral cards. And a lot of it, again, don't panic about it, because a lot of it is common sense, right? Broom in the whip. Well, it's not positive to get whipped, and except for in certain adult situations in which we will not discuss. It is not 50 Shades of Grey brought that question to full light. Terrible book. Please do not waste your time reading it. Horribly written. But the broom can be used as repetitive things, and it's not necessarily negative. You know, journeys can be positive or negative. Communication or anxiety. So, you know, happiness, success, you know, dark clouds, not good thing. Endings, either way, neutral. Tower, neutral. You know, moon, positive. You know, social situations, pretty neutral. Books can be neutral, but secrets can be negative. So it starts to become, I think, if you really think them through, that it really does make sense when you think about them, and take the time to think about them and think about how you view them along that spectrum, because it's all about consistency. And so understanding how you view the cards is going to help you to get consistent readings, instead of just kind of pulling out of the air and doing anything that you want to do. And so it's worth the time to spend a little thought into the idea of the spectrum of positive, neutral, and negative with Lenormand. So I hope this helps, and everybody have a fantastic day.